We're theme park families.
Theme park families.
We're theme park families.
Won't you join us now?
We're theme park families.
Thanks for joining us, we aim to please.
If roller coasters got you weak in the knees,
We're theme park families.
if you wanna find the best dessert or
Take a potty break with privacy,
find a coaster that is tame for little ones,
or one to make you scream.
we're theme park families.
Everybody's ready, babies.
Rescuing you all from life's luxuries.
We're theme park families.
We're theme park families.
Press the space bar. Get it?
Yay!
Happy New Year, everyone. I am Adam,
And I'm Andrew.
and welcome to episode 9 of Theme Park Families. We're so happy to have you with us. And Mother Nature, all of a sudden out of nowhere, seems to have been seeking revenge on the theme park world, as a lot of the holiday in the park events and holiday events at other parks have been canceled over the last couple weeks due to either extreme cold or icy conditions. Kind of crazy after the last couple winters that have been tame, and they've done so well.
Yeah, you said near like the Orlando area, it was like 36 degrees, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, for them ever to get in the 30s, it sends the whole state into a panic, as so few people have winter jackets, and when there are snowflakes anywhere near Orlando, it's pretty crazy to see. It only happens once kind of every couple of decades, so it's kind of surprising whenever it does happen. We're actually able to record today on a Friday because we don't have a snow day today, but we actually have a cold day, where wind chills up in central New York are anywhere up to 30 to 35 below zero, and our high temperature of today is supposed to be about 1 degree. So we know a lot of you around the country are experiencing the same cold, and right now it's hard to imagine the spring and parks opening, but it'll be here before you know it. Hold on to that faith. Along with that, though, it's amazing how many parks were able to open on pretty cold days, including a few times over the Christmas break where we were able to get to Great Adventure on days where it was in the lower 30s and upper 20s. Did it surprise you that coasters actually opened?
Yeah, that was pretty surprising, but thankfully, like on one of the days we went, we got there super early, and there was literally nobody there. It was like we had the whole park to ourselves.
It was amazing where we got there right at opening at 1 o'clock, and we took a picture of the parking lot. There were, like 10 cars there at the biggest park in the world. And yeah, those first 2 hours, there was truly no lines for anything. And that was all we really needed. But the idea that B&Ms can run potentially in the upper 20s was pretty amazing to me. And Melissa actually did a ride on Nitro that day. It was good to get there. We saw the holiday show there a couple of times.
2 times?
Yeah, and very well done. Very professional. The acting, the singing, I thought the dancing was very well done. And a lot of good songs and a lot of positivity there. So that was good to see. We're so excited to get into 2018. There are going to be so many incredible new rides opening, new experiences, new parks for us, and we're looking forward to bringing that all to you throughout the year. On today's show, we're going to be discussing the second part of our Great Missouri trip, and we'll finally actually start to discuss Disney for the first time. So we'll hear from Tom, our friend from Louisville, the voice of your favorite theme park crustacean, Bob the Lobster from Coaster Radio, as well as the other voice from the intro to the Ride This One podcast, until he gets booted once they reel in Neil Patrick Harris as well, give him a better offer than he has with Coaster Radio. That'll happen eventually, right? But who's the other voice who's also on the intro to Ride This One podcast?
Oh, that's mine. I call in every day on their podcast.
What do you say? Do you remember your line?
No, I don't.
It's 2 words, dude.
Something about sucks?
No! Hey, watch your language, buddy. This is Theme Park Families. No! It's 2 words. That's
boring?
That's boring? Oh my gosh. Ride This One is not boring. Dude, it's 2 words. I know. Well, you don't listen. You don't get to listen to Ride This One.
I don't know.
That's
Important?
That's important. That's
Ambassador?
That's Ambassador. Oh my gosh. You're the one who said it. That's
That's embarrassing.
Yay! We got there. Yes, very good. He's the other voice who says, if you want family friendly, go listen to Coaster Radio, although he doesn't quite say it just like that. So we'll hear from him. He's going to be sort of our Disney voice that we'll hear from a few times in our podcast. So how about we start out with some Andrew's news?
If not riding coasters will give you the blues, it's Andrew's news. In its 58 years of operating, Silver Dollar City announced that they had a record number of visitors in 2017. Over 2.1 million people. I can confirm that I, my dad, my brother Alex, and our buddy Slater were just 4 of those 2.1 million. Just an old-time Christmas portion of the year, from November to December, had more than 500,000 visitors alone.
Wow. So they set a record this year for their most visitors ever.
Yeah, and we were like 4 of them.
Woohoo! And it's crazy the fact that they didn't really have any exciting new big ride this year that opened up for them to get to those record numbers.
I don't think it's like the rides, it's just what the park is. It's more than just rides. It has history, it has the cave. I just think it's more the old-time history that the park has, and of course including all the rides and stuff. Yeah, so I don't think it just has to do with the coasters.
Okay. And the fact that the theme park industry is in a really good position right now helps that number. The economy's doing well, which helps that number. And so if they just set the record in 2017 with a giant new ride opening up with Time Traveler, it's going to be interesting to see, will they smash that number in 2018?
Or will the other parks try to up their game and maybe try to kind of compete with them?
It'll be interesting to see how the other parks do in that area. With Six Flags, St. Louis, and Worlds of Fun don't have as exciting announcements coming up, I think, with rides opening up. So I think they're in pretty good position there in Missouri. So we'll talk about Silver Dollar City a lot more later on in the episode. But that's exciting news to hear.
Dorney announced recently that they were removing their inverted Vekoma boomerang, Stinger, this off-season. The ride ended up on an amusement park website where rides are put up for sale.
Huh. So to me, this was kind of an interesting time to do this, that they're removing Stinger now without anything that's being put in that place next year.
2019 rumors?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's so many rumors for 2019, whether they be a GCI finally being built or potentially a Raptor Track RMC being built. But it's not like Stinger's taking up that much land as an inverted boomerang, so that's a little odd there.
I think they could possibly get, even though they already have like Steel Force, maybe like another bigger coaster, not quite a hyper, but a big coaster kind of like a GCI, because they have all that land kind of near Steel Force, and then they have the Stinger land, and so I think they could have another big thing, like their Snack Shack.
Well, what could possibly be bigger than a Snack Shack?
I don't know.
For you, who never got a chance to ride it, who would have been able to ride Stinger next year as a 54-inch rider, which you'll be next year, does it sadden you that you never got a chance to do it?
No, not at all, because because I can just do the one at Kings Island. Hopefully that one doesn't go away.
A brilliant point. Even though Dorney is our home park, you'll still get the chance to do it at Kings Island with Invertigo. So that's a positive spin on that. I personally always liked Stinger. The last 2 years that we went, it was really reliable. I know 3 and 4 years ago, it was terrible and down more than it was up. But the last 2 years it's been pretty reliable. And taking the advice of Dan the T-shirt guy, his idea was always to ride in the front seat facing backwards when you go up the first lift hill. And then the 3 or 4 times I did Stinger, it was always in that seat. And it was really comfortable. No head banging at all. So much more comfortable than a sit-down boomerang. That to me, it's a little sad. Also, it had one of the nicest signs in the world. Loved that Stinger sign. And at night, it looked really gorgeous. So kind of sad to see it go. But there is a rumor going on about what potentially could replace it. So rumors have been circulating that a coaster called Canonin from Louisville in Europe might be coming to Dorney. A few different sources cited that, and of course, you know how rumors are. So many of them are inaccurate. Now, I just showed you the POV, and what did you think of the ride?
I think that if that goes there, that could be a huge ride there, because I think that it's just a little coaster, but it looks really good, and if it is going to go there, then I think that could really help Dorney.
It sort of looks to me like a combination of two different Hershey Intamin rides. So it seems like it's a combination of a couple of airtime hills of Sky Rush, a mini intense ejector airtime of Sky Rush, and then what else?
And then the launch of Storm Runner.
With some kind of interesting elements. A really small top hat that you come across.
Yeah.
It's got really quick left-right maneuver.
Yeah.
It has an inversion, and then it has a really slow inline roll. Well, does that look better than Stinger?
Yeah, it looks a lot better. It's definitely a short and sweet coaster. I think that if it goes there, it's just a rumor, but if it does, then that would be a fun ride to ride.
I thoroughly agree that it might not be that big a coaster, and it doesn't mean that if they get that, then they won't have any other addition potentially later on, like a GCI. I'd prefer a newer ride, but if it's that or nothing, or Snack Shack, I'll take that ride. So it'll be interesting to see if anything is mentioned there over the next few months.
The coaster world was in a tizzy this weekend when a camera at Kings Island captured a photo taken between the first drop of Mystic Timbers and Diamondback, where someone wrote the letters G-I-G-A on a walkway in the snow. Many people questioned online if this was a tease from the park that a Giga coaster is on the horizon for the park.
4 little letters written in the snow, and a lot of people are questioning, oh my gosh, is this real? Are they teasing us? Some people are making jokes that it looks like it says C-I-C-A, and what is a Kika or Sissa coaster, however you want to pronounce that. What do you think? Any credibility in 4 letters written in the snow for a camera?
I think this is basically fake news.
Okay, yeah.
Probably just some coaster nerd saying, oh, I'm gonna make the internet go crazy.
So trolling is what you're saying
Yeah.
there. Yeah, that doesn't mean that they won't get one in the next, who knows, 3-4 years. Definitely it's going to take some time after Mystic Timbers. They're not going to build a Giga 1, 2, even 3 years after Mystic Timbers, but who knows, possibly in the next 5 years. Out of all the Cedar Fair parks, doesn't it seem to make most sense to give Kings Island the Giga?
Well, kind of. They already have Banshee and Diamondback and then Mystic Timbers. But why I don't think this is real is because why would somebody that works there who might know what's happening write those letters and make it that clear that they're gonna do it?
Yeah, if you remember, with King's Dominion, they kind of teased last year where they stated, oh, there's really more coming. That was after they did their announcement for those 3 little junior rides at Planet Snoopy, and they said, oh, but there's really more coming. And a lot of people were like, well, does that mean RMC? And funny enough, it did come to fruition with next year's RMC of Hurler Twisted Timbers that's coming out.
Yep.
So it's not a 0% chance that someone didn't really potentially do that from the park who really is starting something, but yeah, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But I always think it's funny how people get so excited about something that small.
In a stretch of time where fires had been a really scary presence in California, pictures were released from Busch Gardens Williamsburg showing a fire that broke out from New Year's Eve fireworks, which burnt some of the train trestle over the Rhine River. Thankfully, crews were able to put out the fire pretty quickly before it spread to other structures.
All right, so while California is still dealing with a lot of different fires a little bit more under control as the winds have died down a bit in California, kind of scary to see. I don't think you've seen any pictures of that yet, but it was large parts of scrub brush and trees over by the river there, and thankfully it didn't spread more, that they got it under control within about a half an hour.
It burnt the choo-choo train?
Maybe a little bit of that trestle of the bridge, and if that's as bad as it was, that's pretty easy to rebuild and they should be okay. But potentially that could have spread a lot more, especially if the area was pretty dry.
Well, then that could have spread a Virginia fire.
Oh, you never know how much that could have spread. So thankfully, that was brought under control pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All right, so that was Andrew's news. Moving on to our second part of our trip to Missouri. On Sunday, when we were in Missouri, which we had spent at Slater Slater's house. That's when the Ride This One team record a lot of their episodes, and they were recording that day. So we decided to head now west from his house instead of east with St. Louis, head west to Kansas City to go to Oceans of Fun first, which he didn't need to do, and then we'd meet later on for Worlds of Fun. On the drive out, which was kind of nice, one of the things that we passed that I was pretty amazed at was the baseball stadium for the Kansas City Royals. Do you remember seeing that when we passed by?
Yeah, there was a cool crown in front of it.
Yeah, the Royals crown, exactly. And the stadium just looks stunning. It's the kind of place I definitely want to see a game at some point. Really have a great view of it from the highway. It just looks majestic. I don't know if you've ever seen a game from there. That's where they have the waterfalls in the outfield, where if they hit a home run to the right spot, it goes into the waterfalls. It looks like a beautiful place in the way it springs up from the highway. You can see all the rows of seating in that stunning blue royal color. Look like a beautiful place. We also could see the Kansas City Chiefs Stadium, but not inside as well. So Kansas City seemed like a really nice city, but we didn't really get much time to check it out. It was crazy when we got to the Oceans of Fun parking lot, which is in a separate spot from the Worlds of Fun parking lot. It's sort of in the back. And we went in our bathing suits and headed into the park. And do you remember what the weather was like when we went that day?
It was so cold.
It's crazy. Growing up, when I saw baseball games from St. Louis and Kansas City, I remember they always used to do things like they had a thermometer on the field and they would crack eggs and have them fry right on the field, showing how hot it was. It was in the low 70s that day. This was mid-August, around like August 15th, 16th. And so we were expecting it to be pretty warm. But when we got there, it was barely 70 degrees. And the first ride we went on, because these are the kind of rides that always get long lines, are the family river ride, where you walk up the steps and you're in a boat of 3 to 5 people and you just kind of meander back and forth downhill and kind of go up the ramps a little bit. And that was our first ride, and that water was just brutal. I felt so bad for the ride attendants who had to stand in the water. Even worse were the ones at the bottom of the ride, because they have to stand like waist deep to get the raft.
But I think they get used to it, and I bet they get trained, and when they do get trained, and they don't get so cold when they're in that water.
But that's the thing. Usually in those areas, it's so hot in the middle of summer. They're usually in the 90s, mid-90s, a little later August, maybe at least high 80s, but it was so chilly that day. I don't know if there's any way to prepare for that kind of cold. But the park itself, we thought, was pretty, as opposed to like a Dorney park where all the rides are right on top of each other and it's mostly concrete. There, do you remember how that was situated at Worlds of Fun?
I just remember that it was a very pretty park and that there were a lot of flowers and stuff.
Yeah, there were tons of trees in Oceans of Fun, and there was a lot of grass separating the different rides from each other. So there were areas where you could just lay in the grass if you wanted to and get some shade. And with there being so much land there, that's the thing that we noticed about Worlds of Fun and Oceans of Fun. There is so much room there to expand. Oceans of Fun, seemingly in the middle of the summer, would be so packed. There aren't enough rides there, and there's so much room for them to put so much more in. You would think they'll do that at some point. One of the nice things about Ocean of Fun, and I think it's so smart that parks do this, and not all parks do, is that they had their Fury of the Nile and Monsoon. Monsoon is their Shoot the Chutes. Fury of the Nile was their circular river raft ride in the park. And do you remember it had all that great Egyptian theming?
Yeah.
We didn't ride that one because we had changed already. But it looked like it was interesting. At some point, it would be nice to do it if we got back. So it's smart that you could potentially have your bathing suits on, do that Shoot the Chutes, and do the river ride in the dry park, and then go back into the water park with your bathing suit on. So that was kind of nice. So after spending, I'd say, about an hour and a half, and you guys were turning blue from the cold, so we quickly got dressed, put our stuff back into the car, changed out, and then went into Worlds of Fun. And it's nice that you can get into the dry park there, that you don't have to go to the other parking lot. It's very easy and convenient. We met Slater by Mamba at the back of the park, as he had to walk longer to get to us, but that's where the water park was, so it worked well to meet him there. Mamba was our first ride. And what were your thoughts on Mamba?
I liked Mamba a lot. It's a lot like Steel Force, so I'm pretty used to those. I really liked it.
Do you remember he showed us that one piece of track that was white that wasn't...
Yeah.
Do you remember why that was? He knew the story behind that.
I think because it might have been new.
Well, it was a newer part, because do you remember how some of the parts of that track got damaged?
No.
It was a tornado that had come through that area and damaged some of the tracks, so you can see it where they hadn't painted it the same color. So that was kind of strange to see. That's not something you see all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but you were going to say your favorite part?
My favorite part is probably the helix at the end.
Oh, sure.
That was a good helix.
Yeah, that's fun, and that's my favorite part of Steel Force 2, especially that you have the water there. So it felt pretty much identical. Did we do that twice or just once?
Twice.
We did it twice in a row. And the lines weren't that long at all at that point. Well, next we went over to Timberwolf, and I didn't know a single thing about Timberwolf. I never looked at a POV, didn't know about it at all, and you could tell that it was a little bit of an older wooden coaster, but certainly not classic era, more like 80s, somewhere in there. Did you know anything about Timberwolf before you rode it?
No, I did not. I didn't even recognize it when we came up to it. So I really didn't know anything about it when we were walking up to it.
It was the surprise hit for us of the entire trip. I loved it. I thought it was pretty smooth. It had some crazy airtime moments. And the one rough part that you said you didn't like was?
Well, there are a couple of rough parts.
Oh, there were a couple that you really didn't like.
Yeah, and I didn't like Timberwolf.
No, you didn't like it really at all. Wow. Okay. Well, the exciting news that we just found out recently was that what's going on?
They're replacing the helix.
So GCI had been doing work on it and retracking, took out the helix this fall, and was just announced that there's a new bank turn that they're creating instead of the helix, which should increase speed a lot, and really looking forward to that. A whole new Timberwolf to me is exciting. I really liked it a lot, and I thought it was way smoother than Screaming Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. To me, I really enjoyed it, and I was surprised how much I liked it. After that, we headed over so you guys could get your Cosmic Coaster Planet Snoopy credit, and that was one of the things that Slater and I enjoyed really watching this. And most of the junior coasters you found at these kind of theme parks are sort of newer style, but still kind of herky-jerky. This one was actually pretty old. Do you remember riding that?
Yeah, it didn't really go at all.
It was the slowest thing. I think the first drop was as slow as a lift hill. It was pretty amazing.
But it was elevated pretty high.
It was, what, the lift hill was elevated?
No, yeah.
It was almost like a train as opposed to a coaster with how slow that thing
Well,
was.
it was actually kind of cool because there was track on the top and there was track on the bottom.
Right, two different levels.
It was kind of taller than all the other kiddie coasters, but a lot slower.
And didn't at the end it go through something? Wasn't there some kind of
Pumpkin.
theming? It was a pumpkin that you go through.
Yeah.
But my favorite was the look on your face as you're going on it. Because normally, how do you feel about going on kid coasters?
I'm asleep.
Yes, he hates it. And he was looking so angry, like, why are you making me do this? But hey, you got the credit. Well, next we went on to Cyclone Sam's Cloud Poofer 3000.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. It's in this sort of shack-looking building. I knew it was a dark ride that had lights, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And you kind of watch a little video of some kind of nutty professor doing something. And it was such a strange experience. Did you like Cloud Poofer 3000?
Yeah, I did. I know you didn't like it at all.
I don't know. It was just weird. I don't know if I hated
You said
it.
you were about to puke.
It was painful. Yeah, it definitely made me dizzy. There's no doubt about that. I rarely feel anything like needing to puke, but it was odd. And so it's one of these rotating rides, kind of like that one at Six Flags New England, that Joker ride, where it goes in circles and it tilts back and forth.
I think it's called Joker's Wild Card.
Joker's Wild Card. Yeah, that sounds right. And this one, if you're the person on the outside or inside, I think both ways it's equally intense, but it puts so much pressure on you against the outside as it goes faster and faster and faster. And there's kind of strobe lights, and I was happy when it ended because I don't know how much more pressure I could have taken. But it was a unique experience and a very cool ride with a little bit of theming to it on the outside. An intense experience, so if you ever go to Worlds of Fun, definitely get on Cyclone Sam's. Then we spent a little bit of time in the Americana section of the park, more towards the front, which is a really nice area. You've got a lot of trees and gardens and fountains, some restaurants and shops, and I think that's where we stopped for, was it ice cream did we stop for?
It was, I think I might have got the float. I got a root beer.
And it was a nice kind of place to take a rest there. Kind of like that area. So from there, we continued on, and I just did Patriot, which was fine. A smooth B&M invert. There was nothing that exciting to it. There were no unique, interesting elements. It felt pretty basic, but it was fine. It looked good with the red, white, and blue paint job, but nothing all that exciting or memorable about it. We continued on moving towards the front of the park, and you go through this strange Orient area that it just seemed kind of odd. This small little Asian section where they had the spinning dragons. What flat ride was there with the pandas? Was there one of that? Was it like Swashbuckler?
Yeah, it was basically...
They had one. You guys didn't do it, though, I didn't think.
No, we did not.
Yeah, it's one of those rides like Swashbuckler or Great Adventure where you're sort of pinned against the side and then it rotates up and then it's just that gravitational force that pins you down. Yeah. So they had that there. We did Spinning Dragons, which is their Pandemonium coaster. Continuing on past the front section, we came next to the Scandinavian section, which was very nice as well. Again, very tree-lined, sort of looked like an older section. We didn't do the Viking Voyager flume, but it goes over a lot of sections of water there. I kind of like that area where you walk and there are creeks and streams, kind of a nice-looking area. The flume looked like a nice flume there and a great setting, but we just didn't want to get wet, so we didn't do that. Well, then we did our flat ride that we talked about last week.
Flat ride of the trip.
Yeah, that we talked about last week for our ride of the week and the Finnish fling, and thank goodness we decided to do it as it's now gone. And so you can listen to last week's episode about our conversation about that, but I did it once and was completely fine. Slater said it usually destroys him for the day, so he didn't wind up doing it, but the kids did it twice in a row, which is pretty brave considering that is a Disney ride.
More?
There's one more, but I don't know. I'm not even sure where that is. We've got to do some research on that, but there is another one somewhere. But I think those Gravitron rides at fairs are kind of similar as well. We got our Boomerang credit as well in that area. And then we went on to Prowler, which was our next coaster. And do you even remember Prowler that much?
Yes, I do. I remember the whole thing.
So you like Prowler better than Timberwolf then?
Yeah, a lot.
See, yeah, I thought Timberwolf was a little bit more interesting and unique. Prowler to me was a fairly disappointing GCI to me. I thought it had a nice setting in the back of the park with some trees around it, but what did you like about Prowler?
I liked how it did go through low areas. It was a very fast and kind of an intense coaster with many turns, and I just liked it.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. It was smooth, and I love those trains. Those are some of my favorite trains on a wooden coaster. But other than that, it just didn't seem all that memorable to me. The airtime wasn't anything all that great, but it was fine. Just, again, like Patriot, I thought kind of unmemorable. Yeah, to me, American Thunder was by far the better GCI. After that, we did the World of Fun Railroad, which is a nice ride. Do you remember going on the railroad there?
Yeah, I do. And we saw all of the space.
Wow, exactly what I was thinking too.
And, and Slater was talking about, like, how much space they have and how much more that we didn't quite see that they had. And they could put couple coasters there.
It's really amazing that if Cedar Fair ever wanted to turn that into a destination place in the middle of American heartland, that they have the room there to absolutely destroy Six Flags St. Louis with how much land they have. It would take a huge financial investment, but the potential is there. And it's a lot of pretty land too. A little bit of hills and trees. Yeah. And so I always like taking the railroad to get a good view of the park and some of the rides and areas that you don't necessarily get to see. Well, we had time for one more coaster after eating dinner at Panda Express, and we chose Timberwolf over Prowler, but now I can see that was a bad decision for you, as I don't think I realized that how much you disliked Timberwolf when we went. So we did that one more time. We didn't get to do the Detonator, their odd S&S tower that they have there in the center of the park. Do you remember what was so strange about their S&S drop tower?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I don't know exactly how tall the whole thing is. It's somewhere around that 200-foot mark. But the weird thing is, it only goes like 3/4 of the way up. That was the odd thing about that Nathan pointed out to us, that it doesn't even utilize the whole height of the tower.
Well, maybe it can't.
Right, I guess. Like, why design something that you can't use the whole structure? That seemed odd to me. Overall, it really, for those of you in the Northeast who haven't gotten there yet, it really is like a bit of a larger Dorney on a little bit of a larger plot of land. They have a lot of similar rides. This one a bit more treed and way more space, but it had that feel to it. If they added a few more major rides, that really could be a stellar park. It was better than I thought it was going to be. What were your overall feelings about Worlds of Fun?
I actually really liked the park. I thought it would have been like one of the parks that didn't get enough love and was kind of underrated.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think that was a great park. And maybe once they get a bigger, better thing, we should go back.
Oh, undoubtedly. It will be interesting to see over the next decade what they decide to do with that park. I know it always gets lumped in with Valley Fair and Michigan's Adventure as sort of neglected parks, but this, compared to Michigan's Adventure, this has way more potential of really being an upper tier park.
Yeah, I think it definitely could also blow Six Flags St. Louis away, like you said, and probably many other parks.
On Monday, we decided to leave Slater's house very early for a pretty long drive to Silver Dollar City. After we had met Slater the first time at Knoebels, he had mentioned to us there and then a number of other times that, if you like Dollywood, which we had been to last year for the Coast Radio meetup and 2 other times, he said, if you like Dollywood, Silver Dollar City blows Dollywood away. Now for us, coming from Six Flags parks and Cedar Fair parks, the charm of Dollywood to us was remarkable, especially that midway when you walk up the hill. There are all those different shops, the glass maker and the steel crafts makers, and that trough of water that goes above you that whole way.
I think the front entrance and just throughout the park are very similar because, again, they have all that old-fashioned stuff and, like you said, the marks and stuff and the jewelry. And I think those parks kind of look alike a lot.
They do. And so when he said that when you get to Silver Dollar City, it blows Dollywood away, I was like, oh, come on. He's just saying that. How is it going to be that much better? The theming of so many of the rides at Dollywood, I was like, are great. And it was hard for me to imagine Silver Dollar City being that much better. So I was definitely skeptical about how great Silver Dollar City was going to be. So the drive there from northern Missouri down to southern Missouri towards Silver Dollar City and Branson, really a pretty drive. That whole area through the Ozark region and Lake Ozark, that man-made lake that is now a tourist destination that has a lot of hotels and shops and different places to play golf and all that. Really a pretty drive. Rocky outcrops and hills and trees, just beautiful. So it was a really great drive. Well, we got there and it was a gigantic parking lot, in some ways similar to Dollywood's, that sort of spread out forever. And they have the same trolley system where it picks you up and takes you to the entrance. So I kind of like that. And like you said, the flowers in the front, that iconic gigantic Silver Dollar City sign, such a nice greeting. And it just starts your day off right when you get inside.
Wow. But before that, we're rewinding a little bit.
Okay.
So when you enter the park, kind of near the tram station, you get this beautiful view of trees. And then you can see Powder Keg, and you can also see...
Wildfire, maybe?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, because they're on that side.
Yeah, you can see both of the tips of those, which is just, such a beautiful view with just a lot of the mountains in the outlines of the coasters. And yeah, I think that's a very pretty park.
Kind of like, and that's a great point, similar to when you're walking or taking the tram through Dollywood, you see the top of Wild Eagle, exactly. The first thing we decided to do on Slater's advice, since it's his home park, after getting breakfast, which we'll talk about later, is our first attraction was...
Our first attraction was, drumroll please, the cave!
Marvel Cave. Now, his advice was to go early because lines can get a little bit longer. What would you say? It was about 30 people at a time?
60.
Was it 60? Is that the number?
Yeah.
Okay, your memory is far better than mine with all of these things. So 60 people. It's small groups that get to go at a time, and then they space out each group so that line can back up. So we did that first thing, and they give you a little talk inside. And not only did they give you a little talk about all the different rules and what you can do and no food and all these other things. Do you remember what you had to walk through as well? Inside the shop, they have that little...
They have that little tiny cutout thing.
Yes, exactly. That's what I wrote.
That you had to walk through, and it was
to show you what?
To show you what the smallest part of the cave is and what you have to fit through.
Okay, yeah, so super tall people or inflexible people who haven't been doing their yoga, it would be a little bit hard, as there are different parts of the cave where you do have to crouch pretty low or damage your head. And so we had a one group wait maybe, and we were the next up to go. And our guide was excellent. She really knew her stuff and was so entertaining and laughing and smiling, and she was terrific. So you walk outside from the holding area where you get this discussion about the different rules, being informed that it's an hour-long walk and there are no bathrooms, so make sure you take care of business early. And you go down this little stairs outside, and then you enter this door into the cave.
But first, rewind. They also give us another talk.
Oh, what was the other talk about?
Remember where we go outside and then we go on like riser things and then they give us one more talk.
I completely forgot about that part. Yeah, so you sit on the benches outside.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. What was that talk about? What did they tell you?
They told you, I think, that you'll be going down like 170 stairs, I think.
Oh, well, a few more than that. But okay, so you get a little bit more.
No, 700 stairs.
Okay. All right, so the stairs that you go down, a little bit more history. You find out about the Native Americans who fell through first and had all sorts of superstitions. And you learn about the history of the first people who bought it and started doing tours. You go into that first room and yeah, how did you feel about that first room?
I'm not normally afraid of heights, but I gotta say, that kind of freaked me out.
This first cave is just immense, and yeah, it's over 200 feet high. The railing wasn't that tall, and yeah, I was surprised to see you, because like Zumanjaro doesn't bother you, Top Thrill Dragster doesn't bother you, but the fact that did, that surprised me a little bit.
Last rewind. Before you go into the benches to have a little talk, Slater showed us that there's a little view of the sinkhole, and you can see that a little bit.
In the woods there.
Yeah.
Above the entrance. Yeah.
And that's kind of cool.
I also like the warning that they give you, that every once in a while, and it doesn't happen too much, but every once in a while, if you get to the end of the hike, what do some people maybe once, twice a year have to do?
They have to walk the whole thing back up because the train that takes you out, how do I say this? Doesn't work sometimes.
For pretty much the whole hike is down and down and down and down and down and down into the cave as you descend further and further down. Then we'll talk about it later with the trolley, but every once in a while, if that train doesn't work to bring you back to the top, yeah, you've got to do the whole thing backwards. So that's a nice little warning that they give you. So after we walk to the bottom of the cave, you look back up to the entrance and you can see there's a giant pile of rubble of rocks that have fallen down throughout the years. And it's crazy because do you remember the first group who started over 100 years ago giving tours, how they got to the bottom of that cave, what they did? Because they didn't have that built concrete and metal staircase.
They had a rope ladder that they climbed down.
Could you? And that's what we were looking back up and thinking, oh my gosh, I can't imagine being on a rope ladder, climbing up that thing. Just crazy.
I would actually do that, but I would be scared a tiny bit when we're going up because I wouldn't be as scared going down, but going up.
Yeah. And that first room is just so impressive. And during celebrations, and I think they've done it once before and they have a plan to do it again. Do you remember what Slater showed us that they've had in that great, huge first part of that cave?
They had a couple hot air balloons there.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
That's how big it is. They had about 3 or 4 hot air balloons in there.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the tour, I think we saw a picture, and there were like a couple in there.
That's how huge that first one is. One of the cool parts about the cave is that there are so many parts of it that still haven't been explored. Underground, parts that have potential lakes at the bottom that they still aren't sure of. So it'll be interesting to see if they ever do explore other parts of the cave. After that, you come to, what was it, the shoe?
Yeah, it was the shoe room.
That the ceiling there looks like a shoe. And that's where you find out there's a overhang where you can throw stuff down. And someone threw some coins down 100 years ago to see how far it went. And they never heard a sound. And they called it like the Devil's Hole or something like that.
The Endless Pit.
Yeah, an endless pit because they never hit the bottom. So, but what did they find out it was?
There was, I forgot what they called it.
Yes. Guano.
Bat guano.
And what is bat guano?
It's bat turds.
Okay, or poop. Poop is a fun word.
Poop. And so what she told us is that they didn't have the lights back then, and so this one guy, he just had his candle, and back then they didn't have the tour guides, and so they were just on their own, like finding new places and going anywhere they could. This guy, he threw a rock down and didn't hear anything, and back then, in that pit, they didn't have any bars, so he could have just fell down there and died. And then the other exit was blocked by water flood.
Oh, right.
And so the only way out was the way that was in. So that was kind of a cool story that happened in the shoe room where we went.
Just hard to imagine what those first explorers, how they experienced it with having no technology to help them out and get out. Then you go through some tighter passages that are kind of claustrophobic for some people possibly. And there's one part where you almost go past a waterfall that's coming down. That was a beautiful room as well. Did they have that lit up with colors?
Yeah, they did.
Right?
They did, yeah.
I thought so, and that looked beautiful. And that's right around the area where they talk about the one story of that young boy. And what was the story?
So, long time ago, when they just had the candles still, they were on a tour, and this little kid, I think he was about like 5.
Yeah, 5, 6, 7, something in there. Yep.
Yeah. He lost his parents, and so he just found this little corner that we went very close to that he just slept in for 3 days.
It's this one section that slopes up. It's about 20 feet, 30 feet in length, where it's this gradual slope up, almost like a little cave. And that's where he stayed for a couple of days.
Yeah, and he drank the water.
To spend that many days in that complete darkness, it's hard to imagine. And then he was eventually rescued after that. Then, towards the end of that tour, which again lasts a little bit less than an hour, right around an hour, you have to go up some stairs and you go through some beautiful stalagmites and stalactites that are also lit up, just beautiful. And then you get into those cable cars. And when you get in there, do you remember the angle that they were at?
Yeah, it was almost like a 50-degree angle, and it was kind of scary because that train was about, say, around 60, 70 years old, and if we didn't make it, then we would have to go all the way back, and that was kind of scary.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting how it was at such a steep angle, and so you're kind of being pressed way back while you're waiting for everyone to pile in. But thankfully it was working that day, as everyone thanked the maintenance man at the end, who waved to us as we were all grateful that the train was working. So our experience, we all said it right after that cave tour was done, as we were all so amazed. Now, Slater's done this maybe over 100 times since at his home park, but to us, we were sold. I did one cave tour in California once many, many years ago, which I barely remember.
Was it kind of like that cave where it was very tall and steep?
Not at all. No, it was a much smaller cave that didn't have one huge room like that. It was much smaller. But it was fun, and they did that whole thing where they shut the lights off to see what that kind of darkness is like, which is really freaky. But when we got out of there, we were like, all right, we're sold. We love this park already. What a unique element to have a natural wonder like that so few people get to see. And right before we did a single ride, before we even saw the park, because at that point you really don't even see much, we were like, okay, we love it. It's one of our favorite parks. We're sold. And I think that we all kind of had that feeling.
Should I tell them why it's called the Marble Cave?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
In the shoe room, a long time ago, this discover was in the shoe room. He thought the ceiling was marble.
Right.
And so he bought like miners in, but the miners didn't really get anything.
I think it was like quartz. It was just regular rock.
It was just regular rock.
And from marble, it went to Marvel. But do you remember what they actually made money off of in there? It wasn't the rock.
It was the bat guano.
It was bat guano.
But like, why?
Because they used it for fertilizer. And they made a lot of money that way instead.
Why don't they just use the human poop for fertilizer?
Ooh, I don't know. Because they had trouble finding humans that would agree to sell their poop. I think that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, people rather use toilets than poop in a fertilizer company.
Yeah, okay.
After the cave tour, we headed inside the park, and one of my favorite parts about the park is once you go into the entrance, it's really hard to tell that you're even in a theme park, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like an entrance to a park, or maybe a place you can go on a picnic or something.
Yeah, you don't see any rides in the entrance whatsoever. And you see all these restored buildings that look like they're from a restored old village, and it takes a while to even know that you're even in a theme park. And once we got inside, one of the first things that we heard was a trio of singers in the front of the park in this little area where they were playing bluegrass, and they were super talented. You could tell from their voices and the instruments that they were playing that they were super talented. And unfortunately, we didn't have more time there to see some of the shows. Just like whenever we go to Dollywood, how many shows have we seen there?
We really haven't seen a show yet.
We heard some singing, but otherwise we haven't really had a chance. We're always just too busy to do rides. So at some point, hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more of those type of things. So Slater wanted to make sure that we did a special ride first. And what did we start off with?
We started off with Thunderation, the Aero Mine Train.
And how did you feel about Thunderation?
I love Thunderation. It's a great coaster with a lot of low parts of the ground and a great helix.
Oh, a lot of speed through the trees. And I love that you come out of the station, which had really cool theming to it. The station was very interesting and looked like a giant old barn. Very cool. And you come out of the station and immediately head into a drop. Love rides like that where you don't necessarily go up a lift hill.
And in the station, there are these weird people talking.
Whoa, weird people.
No, not weird people talking. There are weird, like, cutouts of people that, like, there's this one guy who has an eyeglass and has a clock watch.
Oh, they were like wooden figures? Is that what
kind
they were?
of.
Yeah. Okay, good memory. And very cool ride, and it has the lift hill towards the end of the ride, almost like the mine train at Kings Island, kind of like that.
Oh, kind of like Powder Cave, where it...
Sort of like that too, yeah. But at least with Thunderation, after that lift hill, you do have another fast turn, and then you head into the station after that. And Slater really credits Thunderation as being the ride that got him into his love of theme parks.
Next, we headed to Flooded Mine, the shooting ride. I know you didn't know about this one at all.
No.
But I remember seeing a tiny little bit of this ride on a video. I really liked it because it wasn't your typical shooting boo blasters, and it wasn't all screens and stuff. It was a nice ride with a ton of physical set. And what were your thoughts?
Well, I love the way the building looked. It was set in that pond, and once you get into the station, the boats themselves, why are you patting me?
And they had great theming. And what were your thoughts?
Oh my God, what are you talking about? You're a wacko. My thoughts are you're a wacko. Those are my thoughts. Anywho, once you get into the station, you've got these long, narrow boats, and the guns themselves were very unique because how are they? Very different type of guns?
They were metal. They felt like 1,000 bricks.
1,000 bricks. Man, you need to start lifting a little bit.
A little more than that.
A little more than 1,000?
Yeah, a little bit more.
Like 2,000 bricks?
Like, not close. 200,000.
200,000 bricks.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why you scored so poorly.
Yeah.
And the premise is...
I beat you one time.
Yeah, you hit the magic bonus target, whatever that was for the day.
Yep.
Yeah, it's cool how the ride ops are prisoners in their prison
garb. Yeah, they have prison suits.
Yes, they did. And the cool ride op who starts the ride, he kind of sits in a cell that's above
it's
the
like
river
a duck
there.
take where
Yes.
And there even was a target like right where he was, so that.
Did you shoot him?
Yeah, I shot it, and I hoped that he dropped out.
But he didn't.
No.
So that the boat ran him over.
Yeah.
That would be wrong. But so much thought put into this ride. So many physical sets and cool gags with like people's legs hanging out of pipes and people trying to escape. Oh, there were scenes where there were like policemen chasing the prisoners and you heard all kinds of funny audio like, hey, let's get out of here. They're coming. That kind of stuff and just neat explosions.
And at the ending, they had 2 gravestones and one read, "Here lies Bob," when he said he couldn't swim. And like the words were like in the water.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that they were in the water there. So that was a nice little touch to it. And far better than the shooting ride that we thought was pretty cool at Kennywood, which we'll talk about in another episode. But this is absolutely one of my favorite shooting rides. And we did it once in the beginning of the day and once towards the end of the day. After the Flooded Mine, we headed to what, in my opinion, was probably my favorite area of the park, the Grand Exposition area, which is like a classic late 19th century fair. It had a great look to it. Very clean, very retro. Love that area. They had a ton of family rides, some swings, and one of our favorite flat rides there because of the setting, which was the...
It was the spinning... I know what it is. It was the spinning disc. I don't have to read it. I already know.
Electro spinning...
It was the spinning disc ride.
Also known as the...
Spinning disc ride.
Which they call it the...
Spinning disc ride.
Also known as the Electro spinning disc.
Oh, what? And it's known as the spinning disc ride.
And it's not known as Spinsanity there, though.
No.
They don't own those rights.
No, they don't.
And why did you like that one?
Because it's so close to the trees that it kind of looks like the whole thing would chop the trees off. Very
cool. It adds that little thrill element as you get to the top of the hills, and it almost feels like you're going to fly into the trees like a monkey.
Like a monkey.
So very cool. This is the area where they had the Kid Grand Exposition coaster. But since it had a pretty long line, it was the one coaster credit we didn't get. We'll get it another time. It wasn't worth spending 35 minutes in line to get that ride. Kind of looked like the old coaster at Dollywood, which they took out for steampunk whistle chaser thingy. Yeah.
Next, we did the Grandfather's Mansion, which is basically like the Noah's Ark at Kennywood. Now,
without the animals.
Yeah, without the animals.
What did you like about it?
I really liked this one because it had so many great gags and stuff and cheesy stuff like the tilting room. And there was one room where you could see, I think there was like a person in the shower or something.
Oh, yeah.
Through the blinds.
Right, you look through a hole. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were like talking or something.
Yeah. And then there was a gag with the bed.
Yeah.
That you
had to like sit up. It told you like on the ceiling, try to sit up on the bed.
Right. And like lifting 500 bricks, you couldn't lift up in the bed either. Yeah. Impossible to do. Real nice touch to it. And again, it had that classic old school feel of the house. It really looked like an old house. So really, really neat. We didn't wind up riding the American Plunge, their log flume, but the area looked amazing. They had beautiful landscaping. There was a nice pond there. And it was right next to the entrance to Wildfire.
Yeah,
Wasn't that a little bit weird?
That was a little bit weird because you couldn't quite tell. We couldn't quite tell what line we were in or where it leads to. I mean, at least they could have had gates separating them, and they could have had one sign that read Wildfire to the right, American Plunge to the left. That could have been a little bit more helpful. But yeah, it's kind of cool walking up, seeing American Plunge, and you get absolutely soaked on that. We saw people getting absolutely drenched.
So yeah, we were standing there just watching for a few minutes, and that's why we didn't do it. At that point, we needed to get the coasters in, but if we go back in July, I'd say we'll try all those water rides. We wound up doing, Andrew and I, Wildfire, which we mentioned last week for our ride of the week. So we did it twice, and since Alex isn't 52 inches yet, Slater was nice enough to hang out with Alex, and I think even got him a little dessert treat, which was so sweet. And we talked about it last week. That is absolutely one of our favorite B&Ms. Right at the top of the list for you?
Yeah, that was probably my best B&M coaster I've ridden so far.
Well, we'll see if that holds up next year as all the 54-inch coasters come available to you. So, great ride. Loved it. Loved the theming of the queue, the shop afterwards, as we talked about last week. Just a great ride. Well, next we went off to a coaster that was our only disappointing experience for the whole day. And if you can say that, that's not too bad. And that was when we visited what coaster?
Powder Cave.
Yeah,
now, I really liked the coaster.
Okay, the positive.
And the theming.
All of that was good. The only problem was...
But it was the line. The line was frustrating.
Because of what detail?
Because they only had one train running on a very slow coaster, I guess, because it has a lift track.
Yeah.
And it could only hold about 10 people, which is...
It's not a huge train. A little bit more than that, but certainly not a huge train. And so a line that should have taken maybe 15 minutes took closer to an hour with only running one train. And if you know Powder Keg, from the station you go to a transfer track where it lifts you up into the position to launch. You wait there for about 10 seconds. Then you've got the launch, the ride, then it goes to the lift hill, and then after the lift hill finally to the station. So when you have a decent sized line and only one train, it just took forever. I don't know if they were doing maintenance on the other trains or just decided it was a slow enough day to run one. But that line was way too long. You like the launch?
Yeah, I liked the launch. It was a pretty good forceful launch, and it had these lights that counted down, which is kind of cool, but I usually like when we don't see the launch coming.
Oh, yeah, that surprise is kind of nice, exactly. As opposed to Top Thrill Dragster with the red, yellow, green. So that's a good point. And it's got some nice moments, some good airtime. I love the views up top, kind of like wildfire views.
Yeah, and this coaster is kind of weird because it's a launch coaster, so you usually expect it to at least maybe go upside down, and so I thought it might have either gone upside down or did some intense 90 degrees, but yeah, I liked it.
Interesting thought, like Top Thrill Dragster that goes upside down?
Yeah, it doesn't completely go upside
Or,
down.
you're talking about Backlot Stunt Coaster where you go upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah, those launch coasters that go upside down. But no, it was fun. And I love the fact that they incorporated the ride that was there before it into the theming of this coaster, where they had sort of a water coaster that didn't last too long. And one of the boats from that ride was in the roof, like it crashed into the roof.
On an explosion,
and you could see the trough still in some areas towards it. The one weird part to me is they spend all that money on the lift hill, and then you do a drop and a turn, and that's the end. It just seems like if you're going to put that money into creating a lift hill, why not have a little bit more at the end of that ride? But still a fun ride, and hopefully next time we go there'll be a lot more trains on that ride.
Fire in the hole!
What about it?
Oh, we did that next.
What is that?
It's a coaster.
It's a coaster. And what did you think of Fire in the Hole?
I loved it.
What did it remind you of?
It reminded me of Blazing Fury at Dollywood.
Had the same kind of feel to it, a lot of the similar sets, and just a wonderful ride that it's so long and you see all these different scenes and a couple of surprise drops in the dark. So much fun. And do you remember what company Slater said had worked on the
RMC?
Which is weird because it doesn't really seem like an RMC type coaster, right?
It's an RMC coaster.
It is.
It goes up. It's a vertical drop. It has, I think it's 2 corkscrews?
2 corkscrews, my goodness.
And then 2 bank turns. 90-degree bank turns.
Well, Slater, I said that's a record that it's the only park that has 2 RMCs after that retracking. So a lot of fun and very smooth. Obviously, the retracking showed. And one of the cool things is about the mascot.
I thought Over Texas has 2 RMCs.
It does? Which ones?
Iron
Go.
Rattler and...
Oh, no. This is like a GP moment.
Iron Rattler and the Texas Giant.
The new Texas Giant. How many Six Flags parks are there in Texas?
2?
Aha. Is it possible that one RMC is at both?
No.
No, it's not possible? So it's not possible that Over Texas has the new Texas Giant and then Fiesta Texas has Iron Rattler?
We're going to edit this out.
Oh. We are?
Yeah.
So is that a possibility, though?
Yeah, no.
That's not a possibility?
Nope.
Okay.
And so we're back.
Yes, we are. We are back. And so, yeah, great ride. Oh, and we were talking about the mascot. What was the deal with the actual...
Oh, yeah, there was a real dog. I didn't believe Slater when he told us. But yeah, there's a real fire engine dog that sometimes comes out.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the managers of the ride, every once in a while, brings his dog in, a Dalmatian who's sort of the hero of the theming of that ride. Well, just outside that ride, I loved this moment. It was such a cool situation where Andrew came across one of the funny, famous characters who's known for that park and sort of wanders around in a very mysterious way. You remember who that was?
Yeah, it was the guy who does stuff.
The guy who does stuff. Wow, your memory is just on point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did the guy who does stuff, what did he say to you?
He told me, I think he wanted me to get measured.
Oh, measured. For like a suit?
Yeah, no, a coffin.
Yes, the classic. His name is the Undertaker, and he measures people, and he says very dark lines like, "Ooh, I've got the perfect size for you back at the shop. Just stop by whenever you need it." And he hands you a card stating that he's the Undertaker who takes care of coffins. And there was something weird about his eyes you had mentioned?
Yeah, he had like, I don't know if they were like googly eyes, but like...
Googly eyes? That would be pretty silly for a scary character to have. "Oh, hey, I'm the Undertaker." Oh.
Yeah, he had like googly eyes taped to his eyes.
I don't know if they were googly. I think they were dark and spooky contacts maybe, but googly eyes is pretty silly. But so are you.
Well, it's a friendly family park.
Well, a friendly family park, yes. And so googly eyes would make him less scary. Next up, we did one of our favorite flat rides at any park, the Giant Barn Swing. Love it. The one at Dollywood is great. We love the one at Cedar Point. Unfortunately, the only one that we didn't do at a park that had one was Lake Compounce, which just had disastrous lines that day. But that's the theme of Lake Compounce, which we'll talk about in another episode. But loved it. Great ride. And one of our favorites. Well, next up, as we always talk about, we love doing trains. And their Frisco Silver Dollar Line steam train is absolutely the best train that we've ever done at any park, and it is so recommended. Again, the same idea is that you get views that you wouldn't normally get if you didn't do that ride.
Yeah.
But also, more importantly, what made it great was...
I'll get to that in a second.
Oh, okay. We're something else.
Yeah, like you said, we get great views, but the views that the best view is when you get so close to Outlaw Run. It's such a cool experience because sometimes the train comes right up next to you and you're pretty close. You're like 20, 30 feet away.
Oh, and it's neat. So you're sort of underneath the coaster, and it gives you a really cool perspective. It's kind of like when we're at Cedar Point and you take that train. I love it when it times up perfectly when Millennium Force gets to the bottom of the first drop right when you're on the train. That's always kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yep. So that is very cool getting close to...
And I was saying, in about the middle, I would say,
Yep.
There's, one more break.
Oh, okay, one more break.
Throughout the whole train ride, or in the middle, when you're in the woods, they have all this old-time fashion theming where they have, like, old houses. They had so many cool statues, like, of bears and stuff. And then they had houses where there were these two guys in, like, the middle of the train ride. We would stop the train, and then there would be, how do I say it? Were they robbers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And they would, like, try to rob the train, but, like, the conductor tell them, "Get away from the train or else I'll shoot you."
Yeah, one of the conductors exactly who had a microphone. And they were terrific. They were supposed to be brothers, one of them smart and the other one not, and a lot of slapstick, silly humor. And that's when they were doing maintenance to the train, getting it ready for the second half of the ride. So entertaining, just great. If you usually skip the train rides at the parks you go to, definitely make this one, especially on a super hot day. Nice way to get out of the sun and see the park and get some entertainment. Well, after that, we decided to head over to Fireman's Landing. And even though the boys at their ages are starting to be a little bit older than wanting to do this kind of stuff and like doing big rides more than this, we wanted to see Fireman's Landing since it's not that old. It's only been a couple years since it opened up. And it is such a quaint little area, and it's so well done. The entire area is built to honor firemen throughout the country, and there are a lot of nice touches to it. Different places where they have plaques and hoses and hats.
And they have
helmets.
They have a real fire truck, right? Like right in the middle.
As part of the theming, it looks very cool.
Yeah, real old-fashioned.
Oh, exactly. One maybe from like the 1940s. If you have kids from approximately 2 to 8, those are great target years.
Wait, you're saying I can't have fun there?
No.
Okay.
Nope, sorry, you can't. Because you're notoriously famous for despising kiddie rides. Ever since we got into this 3 years ago, that's always been your MO. They have a mini drop tower that's of decent size, a frog hopper smaller drop tower that's even tinier, balloon rides, small swings, a Dalmatian bouncy circular ride that goes around. They've got fire station number 3 is great to get inside. What did you remember you were thinking?
I remember there was a big ball shooting area. Pit.
Yes, fire station number 3, which reminds you a little bit of what park has something similar?
I think it was Six Flags America.
Yes, Six Flags America, which is much smaller and a little bit less clean.
It is so much smaller.
And it's great. They have these ball launchers all over the place with these blue
And the
foam
blue
balls
balls.
that simulate water. And all kinds of dunk areas where you dunk tons of balls if you fill it up enough.
Yeah,
and it's just a
and-
fun, silly time
and
where
you-
parents can go in with the kids. And that's very cool.
Yeah, and you can have, like, sacks to bring the balls in. I think it's cool that some of the launchers have aimers, and they actually can go pretty far.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, some of them are very, very powerful and shoot huge long distances.
Yeah, like if there's a kid on the ground or if there's an adult, you can just shoot them.
Yes, but a little warning, it does get a little loud in there. It is chaotic, it's frenzied, just kids running everywhere. But it's nice that it's air conditioned, so again, in the middle of summer, that's something nice to do.
And aren't there 3 levels of the shooters?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's 3 different levels, so you really can spread out, and it can be a little tough to keep a whole family together if you're in there, but so much fun and a really cool place. Outside, they also have misters and fountains to help cool off during a hot day, and so it's kind of nice for that reason. And connected to that area, they have the lake right there, which also adds to how nice that area is. And the Lost River of the Ozarks, their circular raft ride, is connected to that space. And again, that's a ride that looks so nice, and hopefully next time we go, we get to go on that. So we spent a little time there just to take a little break. Well, after that, we left for the last coaster of the day, and in some ways the most important coaster of the day, which was...
We left for, drumroll please,
Oh,
Outlaw Run.
all right. And your review of Outlaw Run, what'd you think?
I loved Outlaw Run. Probably my favorite part were those banked turns, and then the part where you almost go upside down, but you don't quite go upside down.
Oh, after the first drop, and then
Yeah.
you do almost that complete barrel roll, but it doesn't finish it, so it's sort of like a stall, almost like a Wicked Cyclone a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, I know sometimes coasters are tough to compare, but if someone put you on a panel and said, Andrew, do you like Lightning Rod better, or do you like Outlaw Run better? What would your answer be?
Well, so let's put it this way.
Uh-huh.
They're both really different because Outlaw Run has a drop, and then Lightning Rod has that launched lift hill,
Yes.
and then they're both so short, which they have in common,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're different in many ways.
Yes.
Because Lightning Rod has more drops and curves,
Mm-hmm.
and then Outlaw Run has more of the airtime hills.
Ooh, interesting. They are both excellent coasters, no doubt. And the main complaint that I would have is that they're both so short. You're left wanting about 15 more seconds worth, 10 more seconds worth, and they would be such complete coasters. My favorite section is the whole part right before you go back through the lift hill, that turn, and then the turn immediately after the lift hill. So many of those outward bank movements are just so unique to RMC that I love. That really feels like it's trying to buck you out of the train. What it was most famous for, one of the first wooden rides to have inversions, and the whole barrel roll at the end, I thought it was a
Yeah.
little bit anticlimactic. Not that it was bad, it just was moving pretty slowly at that point. And nothing that exciting, I thought, but an overall great ride. And I'd say we ended up with about 3 to 4 rides there at the end.
Oh, and we had to get the famous cinnamon bread.
We did?
Yep, we did.
We did?
Right next to the grandfather's mansion.
Yeah, we did get some. Oh, yeah, we did get some there, right?
Yeah.
Is it as good as Dollywood's?
There's a same.
Same thing, same recipe?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think.
Speaking of that, food was a terrific part of the park. We mentioned having breakfast in the front of the park at Ava and Delilah's Bakery. And do you remember what it was like being in that bakery?
It was heaven. Like,
Oh
there
my-
was so many good stuff. There were, like, huge cupcakes. There was cinnamon bread. There were...
Gigantic donuts.
There's stuff that I never heard of, but I really want to taste.
And I think for breakfast, we had the breakfast sandwiches there, which were already made, and they were larger than your head, I think.
Yeah.
They were just massive, and that was so good. After we did Outlaw Run, we headed over to get some dessert, and that was at Hannah's Ice Cream Factory, which was such a neat old-timey building. Sort of looked like an old-school 1920s, 30s dessert place, and I love the fact that they made their own ice cream there on site. Remember the machinery that they had there?
Oh, yeah. That was very cool that they did it. They weren't doing it when we were.
That brings up that other building. This is something that Slater knew about, that most people would see it and walk right by it and not know it was anything. There was this building we walked into that was recently renovated inside. Half of it was a shop that just had little knickknacks that you could buy and quilts and little food items like honey or things like that. But what was in the other half?
And then they had a huge kitchen area where they did cooking classes. And I thought that was very cool because they had multiple tables. They had one main one where the cook was, and they had 5, 6 TVs around it to show what the cook was doing. And they had the cameras, and I just thought that was very cool. I don't know when they do it, but I know they do it.
And the kitchen was just beautifully done. The backsplash was super fancy and ornate. The separate seats for everyone in the class were just so nicely done. And just the attention to detail was so surprising. So many of the restaurants that we didn't get to that day looked great and so unique and original. There were a couple of traditional burger and chicken finger type spots, but they also had unique eateries like the Lumberjack Falls Skillet meals, just so different for a theme park. Reunion Falls Prime Rib Buffet, which the Prime Rib Buffet, what sounds bad about that?
All you can eat prime rib buffet.
Oh my gosh, which would mean the size of your thumb would be for all you can eat. The Riverside Rib House, which was a great looking old-timey building sort of towards the front, and hopefully at some point we get to go to some of those places as they look delicious. So the park is only going to improve in the future. With Time Traveler opening up next year, such a massive ride, and as long as the spinning isn't too intense and makes people sick, it's only going to make the park that much better. Getting a marquee ride like that, it looks massive, a couple of different launches, and that's going to be so great. So are you excited for that next year?
I am pretty excited for that. It looks like it's in a big, huge, how do I say this, clay bowl that's very dished in, and it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's neat. Stuck there between the outdoor theater and Thunderation. It's in its own kind of niche there, surrounded by trees on one side, the theater on the other. I think it's kind of a neat setting, so that should be pretty cool. Silver Dollar City has a great future ahead of itself, and it seems like they have still plenty of land that they could add other things. The next Coastal Radio meetup is going to be at Silver Dollar City in the last weekend of July, so hopefully people start hearing about this now and we'll meet a lot of people there. Slater is so proud of his home park and he's so excited to show it off to everyone, all his buddies in our pack who haven't been there yet, and it's going to be a great time next year. Well, summing things up, it's such a strange park in that quite often when you go to parks you get a real good feel of the layout, that you have a couple of main passageways that lead to all of the different rides. Here, I never had a good feeling of a bearing of where I was. There are so many little intricate paths that lead everywhere. All the buildings look so similar, yet have a great feel to them, that it's really kind of a different park to get around. A little ways, I think Busch Gardens Williamsburg was like that to me as well. Yeah. That you had so many different sections, especially since we were there so much of it at night. It was hard to tell where we were. I think that made it great that you just didn't know, okay, I'm on this gigantic path with 1,000 other people that's super wide and you can see everything. Here, unless you were right at the coaster, you couldn't see a lot of the rides. So the trees and the hills and all the buildings just made for such a unique setting. So quaint, so much charm, and a park that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, I loved the park too. It was definitely an old-time, old-fashioned park, and I really liked it. So I can't wait to go back.
Oh yeah, and spend a lot more times on some of the rides that we didn't get a chance to do. So the greatest thanks to our buddy Slater at Ride This One Podcast for being such a great host, allowing us in his house for a couple of days, allowing us out of the basement for the rest of our lives, and just such a great guide. He knew so much about the park, and his energy and love for it is just infectious, and it was impossible not to have a great time. So looking forward to seeing him again in the spring. Our friend Tom, who's been a big part of Coaster Radio over the last decade, with Bob the Lobster, his trip reports, quite often from Disney, his New Year's Eve celebrations, which were great for a couple years there, and the official interviewer for a season, was kind enough to send this in to us. We rely on him and a couple of other friends, like Chris Rankin and Andy Saito, for being our Disney experts, since we pretty much have little to no experience with Disney. Hopefully that changes in the future, as Andrew and Alex are both clamoring to get to Disney before their innocence and youth are lost. So let's hear what Tom had to say, sending in a recording for us about a trip to Disney that he was excited to take. So let's take a listen.
Hello, Theme Park Families crew. This is Tom from Louisville. First off, thank you so much for letting me be a part of your show and sharing my upcoming vacation experience with you guys on your program. It is a family trip that I'm getting ready to take to Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida. But it's not a family trip that people traditionally think of a family trip. It is parents and their kids, but the kids are me and my wife, who are in our late 30s, and the parents are my parents, who have not been to Disney World or any of the parks down there probably in about 20 years. Now, when I was 3 years old, my parents took me to the Magic Kingdom for the first time. They were just new parents themselves, and apparently I just had the best time ever. Maybe it was in my blood. Well, we know it's in my blood. Anyways, Mom's favorite story is that we were on the steamboat crossing the lake to get to the Magic Kingdom. And as we turn the island, you see Cinderella's castle for the first time. And I just started jumping up and down, screaming at the top of my lungs, "There it is! There it is!" And Mom tells this story every time I bring up any theme park stuff to anybody who just happens to be around us. So a lot of people have heard that story. It's exciting to take them back, because I like to think that they instilled that love of theme park and theme park culture in me at a very, very young age. We went every 3 to 4 years growing up only to the Magic Kingdom. My parents didn't want to waste a whole bunch of money, and my grandparents had a condo down in Florida. We would go down and stay at the condo, and we'd always make a trip before or afterwards to a theme park. Sometimes we'd go to Busch Gardens. I'd always push for the Magic Kingdom, or sometimes we'd go to some like Alligator World or something down there. Lots of fun stuff. So that lasted up till I reached high school. I have 3 younger brothers, and they would be taken to the Magic Kingdom as well. But eventually we all got a little too old to do that with the parents. My brothers probably stopped going altogether, and I just kept going and going on my own. And not just to Disney World, of course. I got really into parks. Started, really in college. I had exposure to Cedar Point nearby and Kings Island nearby. And of course, I grew up near Holiday World and had Kentucky Kingdom, and just really got into it. And then, right after college, I discovered a podcast called CoasterRadio.com, and it started telling me about all these other awesome parks that I'd never heard of all across the country, and started really getting into theme parks and roller coasters then. But Disney has always been kind of that first love, and Walt Disney World, especially because my parents took me. So 20 years or so have gone by, and they haven't been back. And they've never been to Epcot. They've never been to Hollywood Studios. They've never been to Animal Kingdom. I wanted to share all these things with them. While the parks are still kind of in the state that they are, Hollywood Studios is getting ready to change. My parents are, big movie buffs, and they love Turner Classic Movies. So the Turner Classic Movie overlay of the Great Movie Ride was one of the selling points I used to get them to go on this trip. I've been trying to get them to go back for years and years, and I told them that ride is getting ready to get changed maybe along with that whole park, and that's a park I really want them to experience. So we kept talking about it, hinting at it, and it was back March of this year where they finally said, let's pull the trigger. Let's do it. You have to plan everything. I said, no problem. So I'm going to be taking them to some of my favorite restaurants down at Disney World, including the Sci-Fi Drive-In Theater, the 50s Primetime Cafe there. We're going to go to the Beer Garden at Epcot. Eating is a big part of a family trip. That's probably the most time you spend talking to the people that you're with on a theme park trip. So the dining was probably the first stuff I picked out on this trip before rides and experiences and everything. I said, where are we going to take them to eat? Now, I'm excited to show them all these restaurants. I think Mom will probably like the 50s Primetime Cafe the most, and I think Dad will like the Beer Garden the most. And I think they'll enjoy the novelty of the Sci-Fi Drive-In Theater, but after about 30 minutes, they'll be ready to go. As far as rides and attractions, something to consider when you're with, we're in our late 30s. My parents are in their, early 60s. You can't go and just marathon thrill rides and all that sort of stuff. So the pace is going to be a little bit slower, probably than I'm even used to. And so if I had a prediction for me is I'm going to have to learn a little bit of patience. We do have fast passes for a large chunk of the trip, but they're not for the big thrill rides. They're for things with slower lines and more sedate experiences. My mom does have vertigo and occasionally gets motion sick. So it's going to be really interesting seeing what we do and what we don't get on and what she feels like she can get on. Even though it's a Disney park, there's still things that are just a little too extreme. But because it is a Disney park, I'm so excited for her to just experience the place and look around, especially Hollywood Studios, because just that atmosphere of classic Hollywood and the Streetmosphere actors and all that, just the way they've designed that park, I'd like her to see it as it stands now before they change it. I think Dad's going to enjoy Epcot more than he thinks. He's, the traditional opinion of Epcot is it's a fake representation of these real cultures, and Dad loves to travel and wants to travel the world. I think once he gets in and realizes that all the employees are from those actual countries, and that while it's not, authentically the country, it really does a good job of representing a little fuller culture of the country than he thinks. And there's just some neat architectural things and stuff like that. So in summation, I hope to just really bond with them over this trip. And even more than that, for them to see how much these places mean to me. The classic saying is your parents are most happy when you're happy. And of course, I'm most happy when I'm down there and making them happy. So if I'm down at Disney World and they can see how happy I am and just kind of see what it is about those places that brings me so much joy. And I'm excited to share that joy with them. And then ultimately, I'll be excited to share all that joy with you. So in a few weeks after the trip, we'll get together and we'll talk about what actually happened and see if any of my predictions ended up being true or not. So thanks again, theme park families. You guys are great. And we'll talk to you here in a few weeks. Tom out.
So thanks so much, Tom, for sending that in. I can't wait to hear about how the trip went, which rides your parents loved, which they might have found to be a little too aggressive.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear, your predictions, if they were right or wrong, because I remember you said that your dad would probably like this restaurant, and your mom would probably like this restaurant. And so I can't wait to talk with him.
Yeah, excited for all those things, exactly. And I'm a teacher of science fiction and fantasy, so I didn't even know that there was a cafe with that name in it. So I'm looking forward to hearing what that's all about and to see if the overall trip went well, what rides were like, what lines were like, how the Fast Pass system worked for you.
Yeah, and what your parents liked and what maybe you would recommend for us when we go and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, real excited to talk to Tom for our next episode. Well, on to our ride of the day. And for this one, a classic ride. A ride that almost every park has, a staple of rides for well over 100 years. And that is the carousel. At parks, it's a great ride for young kids. For the most part, there's no height requirement at all for carousels, as long as the child is with a parent. And so it can be a great introductory ride as you hold your really young child on a horsey that goes up and down. It's a ride that's beloved by little kids. So many of them I admire for the craftsmanship, that they were hand-carved horses.
Yeah, and some of them have, usually the older ones.
Oh, yeah.
They have the actual band sets where they play automatically. And so you'll see the drums, you'll see the cymbals, and maybe in the piano keys.
I love seeing that because that's such a rarity. You don't see that as much, I think, as you did maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago. But the fact that a lot of them still do exist, where you can see the drum playing, such a neat little element. And the historical aspect. Clint was telling us plenty about the King's Dominion carousel, which just celebrated its 100th anniversary. And he mentioned something about one specific horse, right?
Yeah, it was, I think, a pink little horse. That was the only one that got redone.
Oh, okay. And they spent a little extra time on that, redoing it. And some of them are particularly interesting. Like the one at Kentucky Kingdom, which we're going to talk about for our next episode. On that one, you guys actually didn't do a horse. Do you remember what you did on that one?
Oh, it was like a...
Hard to describe it.
Yeah, there was one was a rocking chair thing. And then one was like a...
It would almost look like a phone booth, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's spinning, a circle thing that you're trapped in.
Yeah, and you got into it. It had like a door, and then you got in it. And then it rotated the whole ride, so you were spinning in two different ways. The whole carousel spinning, and then this separate capsule spinning. And so it's neat when some of them have a special little thing like that. Well, another one of the classic ones is at Knoebels. And what makes that so special?
Where when you grab the brass ring, you get a free ride.
And people love that, even if they don't wind up getting the brass ring. And that is our friend Chris Rankin. His profile picture is actually a picture of him holding the brass ring when he won it a number of years ago. So that's kind of neat. And so that is always voted every year for the Golden Ticket Awards. That's voted the best carousel because of that element, that interactive element, which people love. But I think our favorite one, especially since you can't reach the brass ring yet, is the one at Cedar Point.
Well, I stand on one foot and reach out as far as I can.
And you're able to touch it?
Barely.
You are? And you can grab the ring?
Can't grab it and touch it.
You touched the ring. Hey, I touched the brass ring, operator. I touched it. Hook me up. Well, we always get the ride all day pass anyway, so it's not exactly like we need the brass ring, but very cool. But as we were saying, Cedar Point, they've got two there. Which one is our favorite?
Our favorite one is Cedar Downs Racing Derby.
Which is great. What makes that one so different?
It's actually really fast. It's faster than most carousels. It has a racing theme to it where there's a announcer, and you actually go pretty fast. You have to hold on, and there were 3 horses in a row, and each of them move back and forth like they're racing, and one's beating the other, and that's really cool.
And then what do they have playing in the background?
They have the music. And the person talking.
Yes, like it's from a real race of someone's in the lead and then it's overtaking them and here comes the next stretch down the stretch, and it's an exciting element. You watch anyone on that ride and everyone's smiling and hoping they're going to win, and it's a silly competitive sort of race. And since it is so much faster than a typical carousel, it has the 48-inch height requirement, and that's the only one I know of that has that. So what a great ride, and one that we try not to miss whenever we get to Cedar Point.
Tip of the day, tip of the day. It's the tip of the day. Tip of the day, tip of the day. It's the tip of the day. Yeah!
For tip of the day, we're going to discuss spare clothes. Always having for everyone in your party spare clothes in the car, just in case. You see people coming off of water rides like a log flume or a raft ride.
Or if it's raining and you don't have an umbrella and you can't get the shelter fast enough, and then you can get super wet and then it'll be miserable for the next of the day. So that's a good idea to bring spare clothes.
And hopefully you won't need them, but just in case. If it gets super hot that day and you're like, oh, I wish we had been able to do this kind of water ride. Well, it gives you that option. It's always kind of nice. And as you said, weather could change at any point in time. So if there's a pop-up rainstorm, then you don't have to spend the next 5 hours soaking wet. Seems like a good idea. On the next episode, we'll talk to Tom and find out how the trip went to Disney, and also discuss our trip to his home park, Kentucky Kingdom. Check us out on Facebook at Theme Park Families and Twitter at Theme Park Fam. Our episodes are now on our YouTube page at Theme Park Families. We're on iTunes, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and a few other places that I don't even know how they got there. If you're so inclined, we appreciate nice little reviews on iTunes. It's always helpful. And thank you again to those who already have. Slater says Andrew falls out of coasters since he's not stout.
I hope it warms up soon for coaster season. I'm in an ice. Andrew out.
See ya.